I spent 10 years building a life for us, brick by brick. As a structural engineer, I knew how to read the warning signs of a failing foundation. But when my wife started coming home smelling of expensive French perfume and looking at me with undisguised contempt, I didn't scream. I didn't shout. I treated our marriage like a structural failure that needed a controlled demolition. I have always understood the world through numbers, load-bearing capacities, and structural integrity. As a senior structural engineer, my job is to look at a massive blueprint, find the weakest point, and reinforce it before the entire building collapses under its own weight. I dedicated 10 years of my life to building a home for Evelyn. I didn't just buy a house. I renovated a 1920s craftsman home in the suburbs of Boston with my own 2 hands. Every beam, every joist, every custom hardwood floorboard was laid with the precision of a man who believed love was built to last a lifetime. Evelyn was an ambitious marketing coordinator when we met. She loved my stability, my quiet confidence, and the way I could fix anything with a toolkit and a diagram. But ambition is like water. If it isn't contained, it erodes the very ground it stands on. The shift happened when she received her promotion to Senior Vice President of Creative Strategy at a high-end firm downtown. Her new boss, Julian Vance, was a charismatic, smooth-talking executive who wore 3-piece suits and lived in a penthouse. Slowly, the structural integrity of our marriage began to warp. First, it was the sensory shifts. Evelyn stopped wearing the soft vanilla body spray she had used since college. Instead, she started wearing Maison Francis Kirkdian Baccarat Rouge 540, a heavy, suffocatingly expensive scent that smelled of burnt sugar and amberwood. Then came the security upgrades. Her phone, which used to sit openly on the kitchen island, was suddenly face down, secured by a new alphanumeric password. But the most damaging change was her tone. The warmth in her voice was replaced by a cold, sharp condescension. "Michael, you smell like drywall and sawdust," she said one evening, stepping back as I tried to hug her after a 12-hour shift at a bridge construction site. "Can you please shower before you sit on the West Elm sofa?" I had it professionally cleaned. I looked at her. She was wearing a new silk blouse. Her eyes lacked the familiar softness. They held the cold gaze of a real estate developer, looking at a tenant they wanted to evict. "I'm building a bridge downtown, Evie," I said quietly, wiping a smudge of dust from my brow. "It pays the mortgage." "Julian says people who work with their hands have a linear ceiling," she replied carelessly, scrolling through her vibrating phone. "They lack vertical vision." "Julian says." That was the phrase. It was the microfracture in the concrete. In engineering, a microfracture looks harmless to the untrained eye, but under dynamic load, it ensures catastrophic failure. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I sat at the kitchen table, poured a glass of black coffee, and began to treat my marriage not as a sanctuary, but as a project under investigation. Emotion is a luxury a good engineer cannot afford. If a bridge collapses, you don't cry at the concrete. You analyze the stress points. I began my data collection on a Tuesday. Evelyn told me she had a late-night strategy seminar with the executive board and wouldn't be home until midnight. I checked our shared bank accounts. No unusual charges. She was smart. She used her own corporate card. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I went to her car, a luxury SUV we had leased together. I didn't look for lipstick on the collar. I looked for data. I plugged a diagnostic scanner into her car's OBD2 port, pulling the internal GPS logs from the infotainment system. The system didn't lie. The car hadn't been at the corporate headquarters downtown at 9 p.m. It had been parked at 142 Bellevue Terrace, the residential address of Julian Vance. My heart hammered against my ribs, a heavy, rhythmic thudding like a pile driver sinking steel beams into river mud. The pain was there, sharp and acidic, but I locked it behind a wall of cold logic. Next came the surveillance. I called Liam, my closest friend since our college days at MIT. Liam owned a commercial security firm that specialized in corporate counter-espionage. "I need some non-invasive hardware, Liam," I told him over a beer in my workshop. The cloud-synced variety, micro lenses. Liam didn't ask questions. He looked at my face, saw the absolute lack of color in my skin, and nodded. "I've got your back, Mike, whatever you need." Over the next 2 weeks, I deployed the hardware. I installed a micro camera disguised as a smart home thermostat in the living room, and another hidden inside the digital alarm clock on her bedside table. I also set up a localized network packet sniffer on our home Wi-Fi to clone any data transmitted through unencrypted channels. The data harvest was sickeningly bountiful. I sat in my basement workshop at 2 a.m., wearing headphones, watching the live stream on my dual monitors. Evelyn was on our bed, the very bed I had assembled, talking on speakerphone while applying a face mask. "He has no idea, Julian." Her voice echoed through my headphones, dripping with amusement. "He's so buried in his blueprints and concrete samples. He's completely oblivious. He thinks I'm at a marketing gala this weekend." Julian's voice came through, wealthy, arrogant, and smooth. "Good. The board is voting on your equity partnership next month, darling. Once that's locked in, you can file for the divorce. We'll cite irreconcilable differences and ensure his little contracting business doesn't touch your assets. He's a good man, but he's just boring," Evelyn sighed, staring at her reflection. "He doesn't have the drive. He's content with being a worker bee." I watched her face. I recorded the entire conversation, saving it to 3 separate secure cloud servers and an encrypted external hard drive. I didn't feel anger anymore. The anger had burned out, leaving behind a cold, dense block of pure, unadulterated resolve. She wanted a controlled demolition of my life. She forgot that I was the one who held the demolition license. The trap was laid for the second weekend of July. Evelyn told me she was flying to Chicago for a 3-day corporate retreat with Julian and the senior leadership team. "I'll be staying at the Drake Hotel, Michael," she said, packing a designer suitcase. "Don't call me unless it's an emergency. The schedule is completely packed." "Of course, Evie," I said, my voice steady, my face an unreadable mask. "Have a safe flight. I actually have a site inspection in Maine this weekend. I'll be out of cell range anyway." She smiled, a superficial, pitying smile, and kissed my cheek. She smelled heavily of Baccarat Rouge 540. As soon as her Uber pulled out of the driveway, the gears of my machine began to turn. She wasn't going to Chicago. My GPS tracker showed Julian's car arriving at our Craftsman home precisely 4 hours later. They weren't using his penthouse. They wanted the thrill of using my house, my sanctuary, while they thought I was miles away in the woods of Maine. But I wasn't alone. At 9 p.m. on Saturday night, a caravan of 3 cars parked down the street from my house, their headlights turned off. Out of the cars stepped Liam, 2 of my burly site foremen who were fiercely loyal to me, and 3 very specific guests: Evelyn's parents, Arthur and Eleanor, and Julian Vance's wife, Victoria Vance, whom I had contacted 48 hours prior with a neat, digital folder of financial and photographic evidence. Victoria Vance was an old-money aristocrat whose family funded Julian's entire firm. When I showed her the bank statements of Julian buying Evelyn Cartier bracelets using their joint marital funds, her face had turned into a sheet of ice. "Are we ready, Michael?" Victoria asked, her voice trembling with a terrifying, quiet rage. "The structure is fully prepped, Victoria," I said calmly. I used my smartphone to remotely disable the security alarm. I unlocked the front door using the Smart Key app. The deadbolt slid back with a heavy metallic click. We walked into the house in absolute silence. My foreman stood by the door, blocking any exit. I led Evelyn's parents and Victoria up the stairs. The heavy scent of her perfume hung in the air, mixed with the smell of expensive wine. I pushed the bedroom door open. The scene was exactly what we expected. Evelyn and Julian were poured into each other on the Egyptian cotton sheets. When the lights flicked on, the scream that left Evelyn's throat was primal. It was a ragged sound of absolute terror. Julian scrambled out of bed, grabbing a sheet, his face turning an ash-gray color as he looked past me and saw his wife, Victoria, standing there with her arms crossed. "Julian," Evelyn stammered, her eyes darting across the room, finally landing on her aging parents. "Mom? Dad? Michael? What is this?" I didn't answer her. I didn't look at her body. I looked at my watch. "Evelyn," Arthur, her father, said, his voice cracking with immense shame. "How could you do this? In this house? With this man?" Victoria Vance stepped forward, ignoring Evelyn entirely. She looked at her husband. The locks on the penthouse are already changed, Julian. My attorneys filed the divorce papers at 5 p.m. yesterday. Due to the morals clause in our prenuptial agreement, and the fact that you used company funds to purchase this whore's jewelry, you own exactly nothing. You are fired from the firm effective immediately. Julian's arrogance dissolved instantly. He dropped to his knees, his hands shaking. Victoria, please, let's talk about this. Get out, Victoria said. Evelyn was crying now, heavy, frantic sobs. The mascara was running down her face, leaving ugly black tracks across her cheeks. She looked at me, her hands reaching out. Michael, please, it was a mistake. He manipulated me. Please, you love me. We built this home. I stood at the foot of the bed, my hands in my pockets, my expression as cold as a granite slab. A mistake is a mathematical error in a calculation, Evelyn, I said, my voice cutting through the room with absolute clarity. This was a conscious, structural bypass. You spent months undermining the foundation of this marriage. You thought I was too stupid to notice because I work with my hands. But a man who knows how to build also knows exactly which pillar to pull to make the roof cave in. Liam stepped forward, holding a tablet. Everything has been live-streamed and uploaded to the corporate server, Evelyn. The entire board of directors just watched your strategy seminar. She collapsed onto the bed, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. Her parents turned their backs on her and walked downstairs, unable to look at the monster they had raised. The fallout was swift, legal, and absolute. Because I had meticulous documentation of her using marital assets to facilitate the affair, and because her career vanished overnight, our divorce proceedings were short. Julian's firm terminated Evelyn within 24 hours for gross professional misconduct and violation of the corporate ethics policy. With no income and a ruined reputation in the Boston marketing scene, she was blacklisted. She tried to fight for the house, but my lawyers presented the premarital asset documentation, along with proof that every single mortgage payment had originated from my contracting business account. The judge ruled in my favor. Evelyn left with 2 suitcases and a mountain of legal debt. 12 months have passed since that night. It is a beautiful, crisp Sunday morning in July. The sun is filtering through the custom oak windows of my craftsman home, casting long, warm geometric shapes across the clean hardwood floors. The heavy, suffocating scent of Baccarat Rouge 540 is entirely gone, replaced by the clean, crisp smell of fresh cedar and morning coffee. I sit on my porch, looking out at the garden I am rebuilding. The air is quiet. My mind is entirely at peace. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty for the absolute severity of my revenge. I just smile and take a sip of my coffee. In the physical universe, there is a law known as Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. If you apply immense force to destroy someone's life, the universe will return that exact same force back upon you. I didn't destroy Evelyn. I simply allowed the weight of her own choices to crush her. Honor, integrity, and loyalty are not old-fashioned concepts. They are the load-bearing walls of human society. If you break them, the ceiling will always fall. And me? I am just an engineer, enjoying the quiet beauty of a structurally sound life.